can't take it anymore. How crazy is that? Elon Musk is now officially mentioning that he wants to shut down the Federal Reserve, which is the central bank of the U.S. And of course, that would crash the dollar. That's totally insane. At the same time, we have a draft for an executive order, basically an emergency law, to quickly establish a Bitcoin reserve as soon as Donald Trump is the new president. At the same time, we see the FDP wanting to include in their election program that they are pro-Bitcoin and want to push for a Bitcoin reserve. So a lot is really happening. But first, let's take a look at Elon Musk because this is really something else. For example, with Michael Saylor. He always does it in a way that he doesn't really like to talk about how Bitcoin and the dollar are competitors or anything like that. He apparently doesn't want to mess with the Federal Reserve and the high officials in the US by creating a competitor to the US dollar with Bitcoin. Elon Musk sees it all quite differently. He's in the Doge department, so the Department of Government Efficiency. And he actually has the idea of shutting down the central bank in the U.S. That would of course mean that there could potentially be a dollar crash, or the dollar would just be eliminated here. Then you just have Bitcoin in the US, and there wouldn't be a dollar anymore. That's super crazy. I don't know if we can say that he's pushing Bitcoin here, but at least he's really weakening the dollar. What he has to say here is in response to a tweet from Ron Paul, who's also a hardcore libertarian, saying that we should wean ourselves off the Federal Reserve just like we should wean ourselves off mainstream media. And Ron Paul has been behind the end of the Fed campaign for a long time. And Elon Musk responds here pretty cool, saying, yeah, Ron Paul for the win, USA. So we want to abolish the central bank in the U.S. I mean, something similar wants to happen here too. I don't think it's going to happen either. It'll never happen. I mean, there are just way too many players who are really against that. But that's already a sign that the Department of Government Efficiency is really pushing to close the central bank in the U.S. I mean, it could also be that it was meant as a joke, but there were no smileys or anything like that because, let's say, Elon Musk writes a lot of, let's say, questionable things on Twitter or not on Twitter, but in Excel and so on. So you can't always take what he says 100% seriously, but that would be awesome in 2001 times. Just imagine if the US made Bitcoin a strategic Bitcoin reserve and at the same time just shut down the Fed. I mean, they can't just do that. They'd have to somehow roll back the debt or something. Can't you just say, okay, hey, we're doing a debt cut now, and we're just shutting down the central bank or something like that? I mean, you can't just do that so easily. I mean, theoretically you could, but practically it would probably lead to riots, unrest, or whatever. I'm not really sure what would happen if tomorrow Elon Musk said, hey, let's just close the central bank the day after tomorrow. What would happen then, and what would happen to the debt and all that? It would be an interesting question to go through. The scenario of what exactly would happen if you simply closed the central bank overnight. But what's really fascinating is that I had this feeling that maybe over the last 100 years, the whole topic of money has become increasingly less free worldwide. It's all been moving more towards fiat money, and the powers that be have been able to control us more and more through fiat money and central money creation. But now, something is really happening. Now, Bitcoin has slowly crept up here and this year, or maybe since the middle of this year, things are really happening here. More and more people are opening up, wanting to abolish central banks, advocating for Bitcoin, and now we have Bitcoin on a really big political level as well, showing that it's here to stay, as we can see. Dennis Porter is tweeting some huge news. I can confirm that my team is finalizing a draft of an executive order for the President of the United States to establish a strategic Bitcoin reserve. And this is crazy as you imagine. Donald Trump with a Bitcoin reserve. States like Texas, Pennsylvania want a Bitcoin reserve strategy. Then there's China, Russia, Japan. Who else is there? Texas or Pennsylvania, which also want to implement a Bitcoin reserve strategy. At the same time, there's China, Russia, Japan. Who else is there? Who else comes to mind? Yeah, Germany wants to implement a Bitcoin reserve strategy too. We'll get into that later. Then there are a few other countries that also want to implement a Bitcoin reserve strategy. And now Donald Trump has a time problem here because other countries, other states could front-run him. Trump, it was unwise to make this public, starting the FOMO without a Bitcoin reserve. He could only top that by saying, we've got 3 million Bitcoin, but it's hard to believe that. He could only top that by announcing, hey, sorry bro, we've already accumulated like 3 million Bitcoin, but I can hardly imagine they've actually managed to gather that much Bitcoin. But he has a timing problem because how do you establish a Bitcoin reserve? Unless through an executive order bypassing normal procedures. And Donald Trump could use this to push Bitcoin because otherwise the states or other countries could front-run him, making Trump look foolish. Normally, you only do that for really special emergencies or unique situations that a nation is in. And Donald Trump could actually use this whole situation to really push Bitcoin forward, because otherwise the states could front-run him or other countries could front-run him, and then Donald Trump would look pretty foolish. Jack Malice leaked a couple of days ago, I don't know if it was 2 or 3 days, that he apparently has insider information that Donald Trump will present and sign an executive order for the Bitcoin strategy on his first day as president. That would be totally epic, you can't even imagine it. At the same time, things like Elon Musk actually wanting to close the central bank. I can hardly contain myself when I see news like this. Sure, it could all just be a show. You always have to look at it critically. You have to look at Trump critically, and you have to look at Elon Musk critically, but at least Elon Musk and Donald Trump are, let's say, on the political spectrum more on the side of keeping their campaign promises. There are much, much worse candidates if you look at some of the election promises in Germany or the EU and what they then keep. There's way less substance behind that. And that's why I'm super curious about what impact this will have on Bitcoin and how this whole story will turn out. Let's imagine the ultra bull case scenario. Elon Musk crashes the dollar, abolishes central banks, and Donald Trump pumps Bitcoin to the moon. I mean, we have Bitcoin prices very, very quickly. I'm really taking a risk here, but if the strategic Bitcoin reserve happens, Bitcoin prices could hit 7 figures, quickly. You can see it 2 ways, the conservative scenario. Like this bull run might be a conservative price target. But everything changes with the Bitcoin reserve strategy. If they shut down the central bank, Bitcoin prices could reach 7 figures. Not overnight, but by the end of 2025 or early 2026. I can see that happening because it would completely change everything. And if the central bank is closed, we will easily have Bitcoin prices in the 7-digit range. Of course, not overnight, but I could definitely see it happening relatively quickly by the end of 2025, maybe early 2026 or something like that, because it would completely flip everything around 180 degrees. So, not 360 degrees, but 180 degrees. It clearly states in this executive order the authority to acquire Bitcoin. Then some numbers, and according to paragraph blah blah blah, and so on, will be displayed. And here, the Secretary of the Treasury is authorized to use the ESF to acquire, hold, and store Bitcoin as a strategic reserve asset. This can include purchases on spot markets, over-the-counter transactions, or other lawful mechanisms to ensure the most favorable conditions for the United States. It's just insane what's going on right now. This will also be discussed here. First allocation under restrictions, then security, custody, and risk management. So how is all of this going to be managed? That's another big question. Does Donald Trump have it in his wallet, like on his Satoshi wallet or his Phoenix wallet? Or does he have it with an official custodian service, like Coinbase or something like that? It's probably going to be something along those lines. What's happening right now is really, really interesting. And now let's take a look at Germany, and it seems like FOMO is breaking out there too. Frank Schaeffler of the FDP says here that the FDP is committed to Bitcoin reserves in its election program. So not just one Bitcoin reserve, but apparently even several Bitcoin reserves. I don't know what exactly is meant by that 2001, how you can have multiple Bitcoin reserves here, maybe per country or something like that. I don't know, he probably just made a typo, I have no idea. He says here that we want to expand BaFin's range of tasks to include financial center promotion in order to better support fintech and crypto innovations. So when you just read this, it sounds super bullish. But you always have to keep in mind that this is coming from the FDP, and we know that the FDP is all about being liberal and free-spirited before the election, but after the election, they just turn into socialists like a lot of others. Not hardcore socialists, but they definitely support market interventions and a lot of other things. And that's why you have to look at the whole thing very critically. Many people also commented under Frank Schaeffler's statements that they see it as somewhat critical. Now Christian Lindner was also here, opening up. Christian Lindner had been in office for a long time and could have really done something here with the Bitcoin reserve strategy. Joanna Koda has been urging a Bitcoin strategy to avoid falling behind as other countries prepare. She's persistently sent papers to Parliament stressing Bitcoin's importance. Despite having the power, interest in Bitcoin arose only after he's out of office, pushing for a reserve strategy. Apologies if this seems exaggerated. Frank Schaeffler, unlike Christian Lindner, has long discussed Bitcoin and blockchain. So they really had the power to push this through for a long time, and now he's basically out of office, and suddenly there's talk about Bitcoin like, hey yo bro, let's get on the Bitcoin train and create a Bitcoin reserve strategy. So I know that sounds a bit exaggerated, and I apologize for that. I also get that Frank Schaeffler is probably coming at this from a different motivation than maybe Christian Lindner or someone else, because Frank Schaeffler has been talking about Bitcoin and blockchain for a really long time. I think they're still a bit caught up in the crypto hype. Lindner says crypto, not Bitcoin. Trump distinguishes. Lindner, Bitcoin or all crypto. Donald Trump makes a much clearer distinction. I'd also be curious to know if they're really just talking about Bitcoin or if it's all of crypto and everything. But even if it's completely crypto, that's fine with me, so I'm very, very cool with that. And here you have to look at the whole thing critically, I would say, but you can also, I would say, give people a chance. So, if they really have changed, if they suddenly realized, hey, sorry, we might have missed the boat, we couldn't stop the Bitcoin from being sold, because Christian Lindner could have raised an objection or a veto. I don't know how it works with the finance ministry, if you can file an objection or a veto or something, but at least he could have spoken up and said, hey, let's not sell the Bitcoin, let's hold on to it instead, because what happens if we actually create a Bitcoin reserve strategy? So we'd have to buy back the Bitcoin we sold, and for the money we get, we might only be able to get some Bitcoin back, if at all. And that is the perverse thing. Germany is basically making a mess of things wherever it can. You really can't talk about the topic any other way. So, even if they do introduce a Bitcoin reserve, it would be really, really bad timing from start to finish. I definitely have a big recommendation for you all. Check out the link in the video description. I've got a link to a TREZOR hardware wallet. The easiest and maybe the best way to secure your Bitcoin from hackers, theft, or anyone trying to get their hands on your Bitcoin. It's really super simple. And here, there are still great special discounts at TREZOR for the Christmas promotion until the 21st December. There are still great special discounts at TREZOR for the Christmas promotion. You can definitely use it as a Christmas gift for your friends. What could be better than giving your acquaintances, friends, and loved ones pure self-sovereignty in the form of a hardware wallet? So, that's an absolute recommendation. Also, check it out, I'm putting the link to Bitcoin in there. It's a really simple way for you to buy Bitcoin. Probably the easiest way to get Bitcoin in Europe. Here, you can also get up to 20% off the fees with the code BitcoinHotel. Super easy tool, highly recommended. And now you pull it in. Here's my all-time high, climb from El Salvador.
Drop a comment below with a rating from 1 to 21 on what score you give this climb here, this climbing process.
Oh, that's not safe here. Finally, 2,000 meters. No, I'm not sure how high this is. I did it. Bitcoin all-time high.